Hello everyone, welcome to this session. Many developers have been using Serverless and AWS Lambda for designing their application and deploying to the AWS. So in this session, I'm planning to cover what all the best practices are to use the Lambda. The assumption is that you would have already played with Serverless and Lambda, have basic knowledge on that, as I'm going to cover only the best practices around it. So before jumping to the topic, let's understand what is the agenda. So to give the context, I will be covering first what is serverless and AWS Lambda, and then I will be covering what all the myths are around Lambda while designing the application, and then we'll be covering how to achieve the high availability, concurrency, throttling, minor monitoring, and then we'll be discussing about how to make a balance between the memory and the execution time. Then we'll be talking about the most important subject, cold start versus warm start, and how we can make use of various techniques to reduce the time. Then we'll be talking about what is the security consideration we should be taking, how to test Lambda application, how to plan the green-blue deployment, and then in the last I will be sharing some of the tips to the developers. So let's first talk about what is serverless and AWS Lambda. So serverless applications are the ones where you don't need to manage any servers. The platform take care of it for you. You need to only concentrate on the business logic and developing your application. You no need to worry about the operating systems, scaling, patching, and any other activity related to the server management. So any platform and service which is considered to be serverless has to provide the four basic functionality. The first one, no server management. So you don't need to worry about managing, running, installing any software on any server. Second thing is about scaling. It should provide the flexible scaling. You should be able to scale up by adjusting your capacity, and then you should be able to also scale out, and that too also based on the unit of consumption rather than based on the number of servers. So we'll talk about that in detail when we talk about scalability. The third is about having the built-in feature of high availability and fault tolerance. So any serverless application has to have this feature. The fourth one is about you should not be paying any cost for idle runtime. You should be always charged for the application for the usage only. So you no need to worry about pre-provisioning or over-provisioning of your compute and storage resources. So that is about serverless. Now AWS Cloud provides many components which can be part of the serverless architecture, which includes AWS Lambda. It includes all the event sourcing services what it provides like S3, API Gateway, DynamoDB, Kinesis Stream. So we will be concentrating today only AWS Lambda majorly and talk about what all the best practices are there when you use that. Okay. So let's first high level talk about how AWS Lambda works. So AWS Lambda is a service which basically needs to have a event source. Event source is nothing but a triggering point for a Lambda function to work. So Lambda function is the place where you will be writing your application logic, and the event source will be the triggering point through which you can trigger this function, and then your function code can interact with any of the AWS services it needs to talk, or it can connect to any other public service. Now event source, as I talked about, that it can be either API gateway, which can be used for your microservices, REST APIs to call. It can be a dynamic DB data. If you update any record into the dynamic DB, it can trigger the Lambda function and do the logic. It can be any S3 kind of a storage where you put a new file and then you want to process that. So these kind of event sourcing you can put in place. Now let's talk about what all the myths are there about this architecture, about this service. So as we talked about in the basic definition of serverless is that it needs to provide the scalability, right? But let me clarify that Lambda or any other service cannot provide you the infinitely scalability. So it does not make all the workloads suitable to run on the Lambda. So there is a myth around that you can use Lambda for any workload because it can provide the scalability for unlimited, right? So don't plan all your workloads to be running on Lambda. You have to be very careful. We'll talk about those best practices in further slides. Second one is about security. So AWS always says that security is a mutual agreement. AWS cannot alone make your application secure, but people who design their Lambda application, they think that Lambda is AWS takes care of all the security of the Lambda. It's not. For your information, Lambda runs on a shared VPC in public, which can be shared by many other Lambdas running from your organization or from other organization. So you have to design your application or your system in such a way that it is more secure, cannot be hacked by any other system. The third one is about fault tolerance. So developer thinks that when I deploy application to Lambda, it is always fault tolerant. I don't have to worry about its availability. If it goes down, I don't have to worry about that because Lambda takes care of it. Yes, that is true that Lambda takes care of it if you configure it correctly, if you configure it to be having a high availability and fault tolerant system. So developers has to consider this while designing their application. The fourth one is about unit testing. So people think that Lambda is running on the AWS cloud, and that's why you cannot unit test the function code. You always have to deploy into the cloud, and then you have to run it on the cloud to either do integration testing or your functional testing. But unit testing is not possible, but that is wrong. You still can do the unit testing around Lambda, and we'll talk about it. Now the most critical part of Lambda is about its startup time, because as we discussed, Lambda will be charging you based on your consumption, based on its usage. So the more it runs, more it will cost you. You have to make your application performing very well. If it runs for unnecessary reason, then it will add up to your bill and it will be really costly. So you have to ensure that your application cold start time and the warm start time has to be considered while choosing your application language, programming languages, the tools, the configuration, what you do. Everything has to be considered while you design your system. So these are the problems or myths developer have, and the consequences are that you will start getting very high bill, or your application will not be running in a secure and in a proper way, that you will end up saying that Lambda is not right fit for me. And that is what the purpose of this session is, to ensure that you understand what is good for Lambda and how you can make best use of the Lambda features to get your application running.